Hi and welcome to EduNation II, which is one of the 3 tropical islands that Nikki and I manage here in Second Life. Second Life is a 3-dimensional virtual world which we used for some of our teaching and training courses. In a moment I'm going to pass over to Nikki to introduce herself, and once the introductions are over we'll move on to a look at Wikis and their application in the language classroom today. We hope you'll enjoy the talk.
Hello, my name is Nikki Hockley and I'm the Director of Pedagogy of the Consultants E, sitting here in Second Life talking to Gavin about wikis.
So Nikki, let's move on to wikis. We hear a lot about them these days, some famous ones, some perhaps not so famous. What exactly is a wiki? How does it work and how can it be used?
Well, wikis are examples of something called social software. So along with blogs and podcasts, for example, it's a piece of software that allows people to connect, to communicate and to collaborate online. The word wiki itself comes from the Hawaiian for quick, and this is because it's very quick and easy to use wikis, which are basically a series of interconnected web pages which can be edited by anybody. Okay, so I say anybody. Usually a teacher will have his or her wiki password protected, which means that only those people with the password can actually edit or add to the wiki pages.
Okay, thanks for that, Nikki. I understand that apart from being Hawaiian for quick, that some people actually think that wiki is an acronym for what I know is, so I guess there's a little bit of dispute there. I guess the best known wiki is probably Wikipedia, right? So can we just perhaps take a little look at that, and maybe you can talk us through some of the most important features? How typical is that of a wiki?
Okay, yeah, Wikipedia is a good example of a wiki, and in fact often people think that wikis are Wikipedia, whereas in fact Wikipedia is simply an example of a wiki. It's an online encyclopedia, but it does show, I think, quite clearly how a wiki works. So for example, if we look at the tabs at the top of the screen across the top of Wikipedia, you'll see, for example, that we're on the main page at the moment, and there's some text there, and then one of the tabs says discussion. Now if you click on that tab you would see comments that people have added about the content on the page. They might say, I think, for example, this piece of information is wrong, or this needs to be changed, and so on, and this kind of discussion goes on behind the scenes. Another very important tab in a wiki is the one again across the top, which is called history. Now the history button is basically where all changes to the page are stored. So in theory, if let's say 5 people come along and make changes to this main page we're looking at any time I can go back and reinstate any of those 5 different changes. I can see who changed what, when, and I can go back to that version, which basically means that nothing in a wiki is ever lost. Although it may be changed, you can always go back to a previous version. Now, the one tab that we're not seeing across the top of Wikipedia, this is because we're not members of Wikipedia, but we would see a tab called Edit. Now that would be the place to click on if you wanted to actually change any of the text on the page. In the case of Wikipedia, you need to log on and have a username to be able to edit the content. As we're not members, we can only read the content.
Okay, great. So there we've got a typical wiki, a large collaborative project edited by a lot of people all around the world, making up perhaps one of the most famous collaborative resources around these days. So we've looked at wikis in general, we've looked at how they're made up. What about wikis in language teaching itself? Is there much usage going on?
Yes, there are many examples of wikis used in language teaching, and quite a range of ways that they are used. So for example, you can see wikis used as a repository for classwork, for links, for homework, for example. And wikis also can be used by pairs of students or small groups in which they could work on collaborative texts or on small projects. I think the best thing to do would be to see our website, There's a resource handout there about wikis from a recent conference presentation, and there's a list of several examples of wikis which are actually used in language teaching. So there are examples of a wiki used, for example, in business English, with young learners, in ESP, and also in general language teaching.
Okay, thanks. Some good resources there on the website. Um, I wonder if we could drill a little bit deeper now, and maybe you could tell us about one or two of the good points about wikis.
I think there are quite a few good things about wikis. I think the first one would be that because it's an internet-based tool, it means it can be viewed by a wider audience. So, for example, if you set up and use a class with a wiki, other classes could go along and visit it. Or if you're teaching young learners, parents could be given access to the wiki. They could see it on the internet. This idea of publishing work on the internet makes students more concerned with things looking good, with presenting things well, and also with accuracy, with getting it right. So that's one thing I think that's very effective about wikis, that it's actually published for, in theory, everybody to see on the internet. The second important thing, I think, or the second good thing, is that they are truly collaborative. This means that one product, or one text in this case, can be produced by 2 or 3 students working together. But at the same time, the individual contributions to the project or to the text can be tracked via the History tab, as we saw with the Wikipedia example.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, it all sounds very good, very positive, and very exciting, but I'm guessing there must be some difficulties in using wikis too. Maybe you'd like to talk about that?
I think the wiki software itself is easy to use, so the main barrier really is teachers' fear of technology, I think. Well, of course, teachers also need to have access to the hardware, so you need to have access to a computer room, you need to have good internet connections as well. So I think that would be the main external factor. But certainly using the wiki software itself is not difficult, I don't think.
Right, yeah. As always, a little bit of training goes a long way there. I'm wondering, to get started, what exactly does a teacher need to have in terms of skills, and what do they need to know in order to use wikis effectively in the classroom?
Well, nothing special really. Setting up a wiki is pretty straightforward if you use one of the free wiki sites. I'd recommend PBWiki to get started. That's www.pbwiki.com. I think most important though is that the teacher needs to ensure that the task that you do actually fits the tool. So a wiki lends itself very well to collaborative writing, not to individual writing. If I wanted to do individual student writing, I think a blog would be better suited to that. But wikis can work very well with collaborative texts or with project work where a group or a small group or a pair of students need to produce one product together.
Okay, great. Right, well, we're coming towards the end of this interview now. I'm just thinking, for teachers listening to this, where should they go next? How would they go about getting started with using wikis in their teaching?
I think the easiest way to get started would be to set up just a very simple class project. There are a number of ways to do this, but I'd suggest looking at our book, in fact, for how to. We have a very detailed step-by-step guide there on how to set up a simple wiki project with a class.
Well, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you here on EduNation II today. I'm going to take myself off, or rather my avatar's going to take himself off, I guess, over the hill there down to the beach, and I'll get back to the real world and get on with some work.
Thank you very much. Yes, I hope everybody who's been listening to this finds it useful, and good luck with any wikis that you decide to set up. Thanks, Gavin.